Hello, my name is Riley, and today I'm going to be explaining to you my results for Lab 5 of this unit. Starting with the views of the Republic environmental groups, they strongly disagreed with the biotech companies. They thought this food they called it Frankenfood, and they didn't like that it's being tested on human beings in their diets. The next group was the industrial scale farmers, and they have a large amount of people to please for their consumers. So any advancement they can get their hands on, they really like to use. GM foods allowed them to grow more food more quickly and allowed them to stray away from using pesticides, which a lot of consumers didn't like them using anyways. So they did agree with biotech. The next group is the organic farmers, and they did not agree with biotech companies. They thought it was against the will of God. They thought farming should be done in a sustainable way. Harmony with nature is what they called it. They used things such as soil and BT to prevent pests, but what they did with BT was they just used it when they needed it. They didn't put it directly in their food, and they didn't always put it on top. So when the biotech companies started putting BT in the actual food, they didn't like this because eventually it would grow resistant to this and they wouldn't be able to use this method anymore in their farming. The next group is the agricultural biotech companies, which are the biotech companies, and they strongly support their research. They said they've done extensive testing on it and they strongly believe it's safe. They think it's a way to stop using pesticides, and they say they haven't had any bad results so far. They said they haven't even had so much as a headache from their findings, so they don't see what the big concern is. The next group we're going to talk about is the federal agencies, the USDA, FDA, and EPA. The FDA is in charge of making sure that food is safe for consumers to eat, and they insist on labels being put on and checked for GM. They have supported GM food overall, though. The EPA has put up a fight with them because there's no way to see if there's any harm being done, and they don't like this. In regards to the Taco Bell situation with the shells, they didn't think this was a flaw in their system, that it really just was a lesson learned the hard way. So overall, they do agree with GM foods. The next group is the retail food companies, and they were too scared to get in this matter. They didn't want their food to be labeled as Frankenfood. They didn't want to be singled out, so a lot of them stayed out of the argument and said it was an issue outside of their control. American consumers, a lot of them were unhappy when they found out that they had been consuming GM food for nearly 5 years and had no idea. But once they did find out about it, they said many of them agreed that if there was labels put on food that had GM in it and they had the ability to choose what GM foods they eat, that many of them would agree with GM foods because of the benefits that brings them. This leads me into my pros. My first pro is in regards to the example of the papaya fruit from Hawaii. When a fruit or any food like this gets a disease, ultimately it's going to die off and not be able to be used ever again. This not only hurts the person selling it, but also the people that rely on it for their food. GM allows them to recreate their fruit so that both the producer and the consumer can still benefit from the fruit and that it's not being killed off. My second pro is that it can add things to plants like medicine. And this is an example. The person in this video uses medicine in bananas, and they also use GM in rice to help kids with their eyesight in countries. My third pro is that genetically modified food allows us to have things such as strawberries in the winter when fruits and vegetables like this can't grow in the winter. GM allows us to still have them because it can still grow them in these harsh climates. My first con is that people were unaware that it was being put in their food, and a lot of GM food is being mixed with non-GM food. This is my con because I don't think that's really fair. People should be knowing of what they're getting in their foods, and they shouldn't be tricking them into research when, even though it is proven to be generally safe. It's not fair to the public. My second con is there was a lot of public concern and backlash. People were making statements, cutting down crops, brands were being targeted. People were just angry in the situation where they started the university floor on fire, and that could have killed somebody. So, of course, that's going to be a con. My last con is that people in other countries are beginning to question GM food, and America has put millions of dollars into this company. So if one day it just fell off and nobody wanted to do it anymore, America will lose a lot of money. My opinion on this matter is very split. I see the pros that it can help in developing countries, but I also see the concerns of GM food because it is not natural. And so if there was a way that we could eat natural food, I wouldn't agree with GM, but I do think we are a highly populated planet and that it's not possible yet to have completely organic food. I think there needs to be a lot more testing done, and I think it is important that there are labels on it because I know personally if I needed to rely on a food with GM, I would feel generally okay with eating it, but if I could avoid eating GM food with my situation, then I probably would. Thanks.